And welcome back to Edric Poon and Company, the podcast where anybody can inspire everybody. I'm Edric, your host, and joining us this week is Mr. Ian Wu, co-owner and CEO of the creative meeting and event space HUONE Singapore. Moving from the military to pursuing a career in the MICE sector to eventually owning his own meeting and event space. So Ian and I are just going to talk about how he's transformed himself and adapted to the changing MICE landscape, and his top tips and values in running his business. Ian Wu, welcome to the EPIC podcast. Hello, Ian.
Hi, Edric. Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate what you taking time, especially out of your super busy schedule. Taking You're so busy; it's so hard to get a hold of you. So, how's everything over at HUONE?
Well, things at HUONE are okay. I guess the word surviving is the best way we can describe the current situation. But yeah, I think it's good to be busy in this current point in time.
Oh, definitely. Hey, before we get straight into the podcast and all that, do tell the audience and those listening out there, right, a little bit more about HUONE Singapore, will you?
Sure. HUONE Singapore is HUONE stands for room in Finnish. So our roots are based in Finland. We were actually founded by Yvonne and UC, who started the first unit in Finland over 8 years ago. The initial concept was to have karaoke rooms in Finland, but the idea completely bombed. They pivoted to change the karaoke theme rooms to meeting spaces, and that's the genesis of how we have started. So right now, 8 years on, we have 2 units in Finland, Jättesaari and Kamppi, as well as a new unit in Denmark. And of course, we have Singapore. So 4 units across the world. And I own a little piece of the Singapore business, so to speak. Yeah, so that's the genesis of HUONE Singapore.
You guys, I've always positioned it as a very beautiful creative meeting space. I've been to the rooms and they're wonderful because they really do inspire a lot of thought with the beautiful colors and the rooms and all that. So for those of you who are watching right now, okay, there's a link below. Feel free to just visit the website, take a look. It's in the ticker right there. And if you are really keen, right, I would really encourage you to go there for a meeting, to visit, to dine, to have a beer, or in fact, there is Starbucks, right?
Exactly. A funny story about Starbucks. So when I had to, very unfortunately, we had to let quite a few of our staff go, right? So I was doing reception duty. And I used to count on a daily basis how many people would leave our premise, cross over the bridge, Reed Bridge towards Central Mall, and would come back with Starbucks. I used to count on a daily basis about 30 plus cups of Starbucks coffee. So that got me thinking, what if we have Starbucks here? And that's how we started the conversation with the Starbucks. We proudly serve Starbucks team, and we managed to eventually get a Starbucks outlet right here within HUONE. Yeah, so that's the story about it.
Really awesome. The idea of just constantly finding every opportunity, right, to as what you've mentioned before, either keep the lights on or to thrive and survive. Those are the best things that you can do. One thing that I've always appreciated is your entire journey. And before we go into a little bit more about your CEO-ship, and ownership, I would really like to hear a lot more about how you started out. For example, you've been in the MICE industry for, it seems like to me, forever, since you had dark hair, I suppose. And now, how did you start out? What was your first part-time job?
So I didn't really have a part-time job before I started out. My career is split into 3 parts, right? The first 13 years of my working career, I spent in the army. The next 10 I spent in the exhibitions business. That's where we met. And then the next journey, which is basically from 2019 Q4 to present, is in the venue business. So career is spread across 3 parts. Why did I start out in the army? I think the simple answer is I don't come from a well-to-do family. My dad basically is a cleaner. My mom works in administration. So basically the one way that we could help the family along was to start working early, because I was really crappy in my grades back then. I didn't value education at that particular point in my life. So the only thing to do was to join the army at the tender age of 16. And then I spent 13 years there. So that's how I basically started. Yeah.
Okay, very, very interesting. And one of the things is that, I mean, we basically, I was in military as well, for a much shorter time, as a military regular. But everybody has their own key takeaways, and some love it, some not so much. But I do think that there are definitely key takeaways from that. And what do you think that your key takeaways were that kind of led you down, to the to basically do a lot better in your professional career?
I would say the key takeaway would be that um, I think being able to accomplish really great things involves building a really strong team.
Mm,
And in the army, I think the general consensus is, although every single male Singaporean has to go through the army, right? Generally, people don't want to go there, right? So you have a situation where, as a regular, you have to motivate folks that don't really want to be there. So that takes a bit of skill, right? So how do you do it? You can't fire people from the army if they're completely crappy, right? Or they do really lousy in a job. So the only way that you can motivate them to perform well to a very high level would be to give them a sense of belonging, number one, and two, to make them feel part of a greater picture. And the way that you do it is either through tough training or bonding or stuff along those lines, right? So basically, if you do that repeatedly and over a long period of time, it helps you really to learn how to get the best out of your teams. You may not always have the best people. You can't fire anybody from the army, right? So it helps you to make the best with what you have and to build strong teams. Yeah. So I think that's my greatest takeaway. And how do you accomplish this? I think there's a litany of things you can do, right? But I think the very basic thing is to be with your men in the trenches, right? I mean, like if you want to be an armchair general, then you're going to be completely screwed, right? Because the one thing that people really generally like is if you're there with them and suffering with them and going through the rigors, right? If you juxtapose that to being in a venue, right? It involves, maybe it could be cleaning the toilets with your team when the guests have left, or mopping the floor, or doing bar duty, or doing reception duty, or manning the phone, for example, right? So I think just showing the men that you, or the team, that you know what it's like and you're prepared to walk the talk and to go through the difficult periods with them. I think that's the greatest way to build a strong team. Yeah.
Oh, completely agree with you there. Nobody likes to suffer alone. That's a fact,
Misery loves
right?
company, right?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And we're in plenty of company lah. I do think, anybody who joins the Epic family definitely knows we're full of it.
Or being friends with you is misery itself, right? So
Indeed, indeed. And then after the military, right? Once you got through the military already, okay. What made you want to leave the military though? I am quite keen to find out.
yeah, so I mean, to give it context, right? The reason I joined the army was to help the family, right? That was the principal objective of joining the army. Did I want to make it a career? Yes, initially when I started out, but I think probably about 3 years or 4 years after joining the army, I realized that that's probably not the place for me. As great as a place it is, it's probably not for me. So probably about 3 years into my 13-year contract, I decided, okay, I want to leave. I don't really know what I want to do, but I was going to prepare for my departure, right? So that involved me flipping up newspapers at that time. That was 2001, 3 years after I joined, right? So looking at newspapers, and I only had N-level education then, right? N/horrible O-level education. So I was looking at papers, and then I realized that the only job I could get back then with that kind of grades was as a storeman or a pump attendant or a storekeeper or something along those lines. I mean, which is great jobs, right? But I think the idea was that I wanted to have a bit more options, right? So I knew I wanted to leave at the age of 3 years after joining. That was about 19 years old. So that started me on a pathway of studying part-time, doing my diploma, doing my advanced dip, my degree, and then following which doing my postgraduate. If we go a bit into that, that involved, because I couldn't afford taking no pay leave, right? If I had taken an army scholarship or something, I would have my contract extended. So I didn't want that. So the only way to do it was to mix work and education. So I would very regularly go out for outfield missions or training. And then when my men had completely fallen asleep in their tents or shell scrapes or foxholes, I would take the ground sheet, and cover myself flip open my textbooks, turn on a torchlight and study. I was doing that for like 7 or 8 years. I would go to Australia for training, and my textbooks would be in my full pack with me. And back then I was in the reconnaissance team, right? So it involved carrying the recce stuff plus my textbooks. So that was my life for a good 8 years, yeah, studying while working.
Yeah, I mean, one thing about you is that you are probably one of the most resilient people that I know, really, and really you persevere like nobody's business. So I mean, that's just a testament to the kind of motivation that you have. But when you were doing all of this, right, did you already have in mind that you're saying, I'm gonna run my own business one day? Because I mean, we talked about this before. You were a bit of a grease monkey too. You loved automotives and all. But did you already think that this is what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna own something, and gonna do something amazing with myself or for myself?
I guess the idea was there, right? But the entrepreneurship part really started when I was in the army, right? Um, being a sergeant in the army, you don't really earn that much, right? And education is not cheap, right? I mean, like doing the diploma and the advanced dip really costs some money. So the only way I could make ends meet was, number one, I had to find some way to make extra money on the side, and that involved one thing I tried was to buy and sell handphones to Indonesia. That made some money. It didn't really work out. But what really kind of caught on was the fact that I was so in love with motorcycles, and I used to wrench on my own bikes at my own time, like tuning the carburetor or mucking about with the exhaust. So it reached a point where I decided to help people repair their bikes, and I would do it under my block in Jurong West Extension. So they would come to my house on Saturdays or Sundays or evenings, and I would help them fix their bikes, swap out their suspension. I didn't always do a great job, but it was a way to pay the bills, right? And that kind of got me kind of used to working on stuff that I didn't completely know, but I kind of understood the basics. And that led me to eventually developing my own line of exhaust systems that I partner with this guy called Jesse Kynes from Kind Tech Engineering. And then we basically made a series of motorcycle headers that, through the partnership, we sold through his customers as well. And that proved to be pretty lucrative back then. It helped to pay for school fees, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, you see, all of this, right, eventually led you somewhere. That's the amazing thing. When you look back, every step of the way, it seemed like all these things had a purpose.
Yeah.
And it just helped you to lay that path through. But the important thing was that you had the idea, and it kind of brought you there. And that's really cool to see, through all of this. And at the same time, right, did you also ever think that you would stick to the mice industry for such a long time after that? What is it about the mice industry that you love so much?
That's a good question, which I will choose not to give you the diplomatic answer to.
Please don't.
So when I left the army, right, and that was 2011 January 4th, 2011 January 4th, right? So what happened was I left. I had a degree with thankfully good grades, and I was in the middle of doing my master's, right? So I just basically spammed my CV to whoever and whomever was looking for a hire, right? So it would be banking, insurance, blah blah blah. I went for a litany of interviews, right? But the only folks that actually called me for an interview was informal exhibitions, right? This lady called Susan Elson, who was the divisional director for the healthcare division, and she was working under Roslyn Ng, who eventually became one of my mentors in the space, right? So they gave me a job as a sales manager with informal exhibitions. They gave me the project, which is this project called Aesthetics Asia. I had no idea. I mean, going from army to aesthetics is two different things altogether, right? So that was my first job, basically. Did I really want to be in exhibitions? No. Why did I get hired? Because obviously I had run NDP before, a section of NDP, and that gave me event experience. So was it my dream job? I can't say it was, but it was something that came up, and I kind of stuck with it, and the story, that's how the story started. Yeah.
Okay. And somehow or other, you've stuck with that for 13 years. Was it 13?
10, actually.
10,
I guess the reason why the reason why exhibitions are so interesting, right? Especially exhibitions that you own the IP to. So typically, for most people, when you tell them you're in events, they will say, "Oh, you plan weddings." Or some people who run conferences, they will say, "Oh, you run conferences for people." So that there's a distinction. We, or rather, people like you and I, we come from the space where we create the concept for the event. Let's say, for example, it's Internet of Things, IoT. We create the concept and then we go market the exhibition and the conference if it's part and parcel together, right? And basically we own the IP for it. So the benefit for us in the long run is that we get to sell the IP on to somebody who might be keen on buying it, right? So the reason why it was so attractive to me, especially, is because running an IP-owned show, it's almost like running your own business. But the flip side is that you don't really have the huge cost to underwrite as a business owner. You basically are leveraging off somebody else's money. In that case, the first job, it was Informa. They own the rights to Aesthetics Asia, and I ran the show for them eventually. So you own the P&L. You may not see full staff costs, but you kind of run it like a small business. I mean, long story short, and I should have started with that, but basically it's like running a small business. So that's why I liked it. And the fact that you get to, I think the one thing that really intrigued me about this was the fact that you get to experience finance, you get to experience human resource to a certain extent, business management, operations, marketing and sales. You get to experience all of those in little tiny slices for each project that you run. So that's what really kept me going in the exhibitions industry. If you had told me that I would have been doing sales my whole life, I don't think I would have stuck it out so long. So I guess it was serendipitous in a way through the, like what you said, the dots were connected. I had experience at NDP. I was hired by an exhibitions company, and I got this experience. Yeah, but basically it got me glued. So I was there for a good 10 years till I left. Yeah.
So eventually, how did that eventually lead you down to becoming a co-owner of HUONE?
So how did I lead? I left the exhibitions company. So I went from Informa to SingX Exhibitions, and I left. I wanted to take a break because I was a little bit tired. I wanted to take a break, and I was reached out to by a headhunter, right, from Mercury Oval, right? So they were like, "Hey, you've been in the exhibition space for a while. You started quite a number of projects. You've run shows in Africa and India and whatnot. How would you like to take on a venue hat, right? Something that is be on the other side of the coin, so to speak, right?" So I said, okay. I never heard of this place before, and I always thought that I probably know most of the venues in Singapore. Right? I mean, after running so many conferences here, right? Like HUONE Singapore, never heard of it. Looked it up. Concept looked intriguing, and I came for an interview with the founder, Yvonne. She flew in, and we spoke, and that's how the story began. That's how I eventually landed the role. I mean, till today, I still think that crazy, right? I mean, bringing in an exhibition person in to run a venue is pretty ballsy, right? I mean, if you think about it. The fact that to run a venue is almost like another complete set of skills, right? You need F&B experience, you need like real venue operational experience. So got the job in 2009. 2019, August 28 is when I took on the role from a really lovely lady. I took over as a CE from Joanne, whom we're still good friends. Yeah, and that started my story as CEO of HUONE Singapore back in 2019. Yeah.
How was that a stark, I would say school of hard knocks, from moving to project director or, whichever director it was in a company which you had entrepreneurship, believing it was your own business, but somebody else's money. But now you're fully invested in HUONE in that sense. And it literally is your own business. How big a difference was that? And the transition and the difficulties, right, of actually just taking over a completely different ship?
Well, to give it context, when I took over, I didn't own the company yet. I was running it for them. I was CE for Singapore, right? HUONE Singapore. I actually bought over, or I took about a 30% stake actually in the middle of COVID. That was it was formalized probably around June last year, May, June, something like that. And back then, the idea was to make sure that the business survived because we needed a capital injection. Long story short, that was the real impetus to take a stake in the business, right?
Right.
And I guess that it's I mean, whether or not you're owner of a business, I think as the CE, right? I think the responsibility doesn't really change. It doesn't make you. I don't think it made me a really different person. But I think that for anybody to understand what it's like, right? I mean, the buck stops with you, right? The buck stops you for everything, right? I mean, like
Mm.
marketing everywhere will come to you, and sales and operations and your chefs and your service team, everything. I mean, the fact that it's a small business, you have to take care of your foreign workers, their levies and your GST submissions. It all comes to you as a small business, right? So um, it was a huge change. It was a huge change from going from a place like Singex or Informa, where you had a whole crew to do these things for you. And when you transit to a small business, even though it's a venue, right? I mean, these things fall on your lap, and you see, oh my God, right? You've always envisioned having this. When growing up, you always wanted to have your own business, and how
Mm.
successful you wanted a business to be. But now you really get to see what's happening in the back end, right? I mean, you're like, oh my God, there's so much to do. Month-end reconciliation and forecasting is just one thing, right? But recon whether how the books are closed every month. What's your cash flow for the next few months. There's so much you need to consider. Yeah. So I don't think I changed very much from when I was a CE versus a business owner. But I think the one thing that really opened my eyes was really getting to know the nitty gritty for each of the functional roles, what needs to be done. I mean, like,
Mm.
for example, for marketing, right? When you used to tell the marketing team, hey, let's run a Google ad campaign, all right? But then they don't tell you that for every single Google ad campaign, you need to create copy for all the variations of that particular campaign, and you need to analyze Google Trends, and you need to watch your cost per click, and you need to do your budgeting, on and on, right? So I think the wonderful thing about this job is that, and the fact that you really run it autonomously, HQ doesn't really get involved. So you get to experience all of these things, and it's like this school of hard knocks for you, right? Because you get to see directly if what you have done doesn't work immediately, right? So the con is you have a lot more to do. You have a lot more to take
Mm.
care of. The benefit is whatever you do, you see a result, because you're involved in the daily operations as well, right? So if you do something that is going to completely screw up your operations teams, you're going to feel it because you're on the ground having to execute your plan, right? So I think it's such a wonderful experience. I love it. I think people might think I'm crazy, but I really love it because you get to experience just so much. Yeah. Sorry, I ramble on. Yeah.
No, 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 please don't. It's a wonderful thing, that you are sharing. And at the end of the day, I really do think that this is what this podcast is really all about, is to hear everybody's stories, regardless whether they sound similar or, but they're always different. Everybody can always pick up these little gems, from all of this, be it whether it's going to be the values of your perseverance or the ability to have that inference of what they've learned before and how they apply it today, and more importantly, how they evolve as they over time. I mean, these are things that I'm sure that you have seen it yourself, and through all that experience, it does lead me to another thing. I mean, we're all in this industry together. Um, the MICE industry, as you know, is a very, very challenging time. Events has diminished, God knows how many percent already. I'm not a stats person. I do not do the percentages, but basically it
Yeah.
sounds like zero almost. But what are your plans, when taking over HUONE now, and what are your plans to so-called make HUONE great again?
Well, great is I mean, by definition, great could mean different things for different people,
Mm.
right? But I think the first thing we have to make sure is that we take care of the people that are here with you right now in the company. You have to make sure that you try your darndest to be able to make sure that they have a stable job to come to. Salaries are still paid on time, and to achieve that, right? So I mean, even before talking about being this incredible venue, right, which of course you need to be, right? But to be successful before you can reach that point, you need to make sure that you can survive first, right? The one thing that I would tell anybody in this industry is that don't uh, don't wait too long to try things. So the one logic that I've
Mm.
had that I've been trying to inculcate within the team as well is to try fast, fail fast, right? Have an idea, look at how it's going to run operationally, do the numbers. If you're not sure, just try. I'll give a very simple example. When COVID started, right, as a venue, we couldn't even accept booking. So what we did was we did catering, we did Grab food, we pivoted to co-working spaces, we did food delivery. What else did we do? I lost count. We tried to open up for dine-ins as well. Basically, we tried a litany of things, and the idea was that you would try, and if you fail, just shed it and move on to the next thing. But it's easier said than done, right? So for every idea that you come up with, you have got to figure out how you're going to action on it. So for a period of time, right, our team that stuck it out with me, right? We would go to MRT stations in the morning, 7:45, before coming to the office. We will go and distribute flyers to promote our co-working and Grab takeaway. We would do that like every single day. Before we come in, we're back in the office by 9. We'll do our cold calls, our outreach. We would handle the few guests that we have. So basically, it's just try whatever we could, right? Co-working worked a bit for us. Demand has dropped recently. Corporate meetings was really slow then, but we managed to pivot to doing weddings. We managed to kind of break into a little bit with the Malay wedding market. Church services is something that we managed to pick up on. We also opened for dine-in as well. We've never done it historically. Historically, I think, I mean, not never, but we have not done it to such an extent. So it was really a case where try what you can to make sure that we can put food on the table for the team, right? So, yeah, I mean, I didn't really answer your question about being great, but for the COVID period, it was about just trying whatever we can. And to be really careful of fads, because there were so many fads going on. Oh, we tried this and we tried that. But I think it's okay to try a fad, but make sure you're at the starting point of the curve as opposed to the midpoint of the bell-shaped curve, right? Because if you're at the tail end on the midpoint, by the time you invest and you roll everything out, right, there is a gestation period. And the problem is if you're at the midpoint of the curve, by the time your idea gestates and people actually come to you for that, right, it might be when the demand is completely dried, right? So try fast, fail fast. I think that's the one motto you have to have, and be ready to pivot as quickly as possible and try whatever it takes to survive. I think that's critical. Yeah.
Right. And then what are your plans to let's say, for example, like what do you have in mind really at this point in time to say that, once things start picking up, what do you envision HUONE to be like? And what are you going to do to achieve that?
I think the principle that HUONE was founded to hold business meetings, I think that should continue as the key pillar for the business. To run I mean, that obviously continues as a key area. If you want to talk about doing dine-ins over the long run, it's something that needs to be considered really carefully, because typically for this particular area that we're in, the dine-in is really an evening crowd, or sometimes it's a lunch crowd, but the lunch traffic through our primary surveys that we've conducted around here isn't really great. So if you do run a dine-in, let's say, for example, you want to open yourself up as a restaurant every single day, it essentially requires you to run 3 shifts, 3 teams, right? So you have the opening team, you have your midday team, and your closing team. So while I would say I would love to monetize the venue 24/7, it requires you to have to run 3 shifts, which do you want to take on that additional manpower right now, or do you want to kind of do it on a case-by-case basis? So I think maybe in the long run, monetizing the venue Monday to Saturday as opposed to just Monday to Friday, and Monday to Friday in the evenings as well, is something that I want to go towards. If you want to talk about the HR part that we really touched on already, we need to be prepared to run 3 shifts. Kitchen team needs to grow. Menu has to change quite a fair bit. In terms of the venue itself, the infra, right? We have really lovely balconies that overlook the Singapore River. I think the one thing that needs to be done if we want to do dine-ins is to really to try to leverage on the fact that we have balconies. Right now, the balconies are non-air conditioned. They have a lovely view of the Singapore River. But what I probably want to do is to glass it all up so that we can air condition the exterior space as well. So I think these are the kind of things that you have to do to be able to monetize the dine-in business. Is it on the radar? Yeah. Is it going to happen immediately? Probably not. Probably on an ad hoc basis. I talked a little bit about co-working earlier. I think that the demand is kind of dropped quite significantly. Just looking at the impressions from our Google advertising campaign as well as Google Trends in terms of searches. I think because most people are back to the office, and the co-working side of things, we have no lack of suppliers in the space. You have Regis, you have SurfCorp, so on and so on. You have Justgo. So I think going back to the business model that we have, I think it's now that we can focus on our core pillar, which is business meetings. I think it's important to up the experience for them, to make sure that, like little things, right? Like you don't need to cross the bridge to buy Starbucks, or the fact that we try to up the customer service for the guests. Try to work within COVID regulations, keep them safe here. Make sure that the meetings that they run are productive. So I think these are the things that we will probably focus on a lot more moving forward. Yeah.
Okay, and one last thing, right, is like to paint that picture in the mind of whoever is listening and watching, right? Once things kind of get better, what should we see, at HUONE Singapore when we go in, and it's just paint that rosy picture for me, will you?
I think if you've had, okay, so maybe I should answer this question in two parts, right? The kind of people that come to HUONE first, right? So if you were to, let's assume that you are a business owner and you need a meeting space, right? When you just start out your business, the first places you run your meetings are in cafes. If you have money, then you do it in restaurants. And when you do amass a certain amount of capital, you might want to bring your customers to a hotel ballroom, for example, to have your kickoff meetings or your workshops or whatnot, right? So your level of experience goes up: cafe, restaurant, hotels. But then after a while, you realize that generally hotels are square boxes with, it's a square box, right? So you need to go through that journey first before you think of having generally, and most people have to go through that journey. Before you feel like, hey, is there something in between a cafe, restaurant, and a hotel ballroom? And that's where we come in, right? It's a creative meeting space. I mean, like right now we are seated in Sandbox Room, which is purpose built to help break down the barriers between baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y. So first and foremost, the people that come here need to have gone through that journey for them to really appreciate what we do. If you talk about what we want to offer these customers when they come here, right? I think generally what we want to make sure that they feel is that they feel at ease. So it's like having your meetings in a place in the pub that you visit every Friday after work. So generally we know almost every of our organizer by name, right? Whether it's a large corporate or mid or small size customer. I think we pride ourselves on the fact that we know almost everyone individually, and it's like coming to your favorite pub, right? You know everybody and kind of know what you want most of the time, what irks a particular customer, what makes a particular customer happy, what are their idiosyncrasies, So I think coming to a space like HUONE is the familiarity of it and the kind of more relaxed culture that we have here, while still offering obviously good customer service, right? So I think that's the first thing. The second thing that I want to try to really improve on is food, right? Because we've traditionally been serving buffet, but because of COVID, we went to the bento box, right? And that's another thing altogether, to be able to cook bento for people and to make it tasty, right? So I think the food game is where we want to level up. We've just grown our kitchen team, so it's something that we really want to focus on alongside the service and your usual pub kind of experience, right? So I think these are the things that I want to really focus on, and I think that's a niche that I'm really happy to take, because I mean, let's be honest, right? I mean, like you can't compete with Singapore Expo, which is like a 1 million square foot venue. Okay, now with Connect at Changi, it's a bit less, but it's a big venue, right? And MBS, you have the gaming thing going on, and Suntec with Arun, you have the retail space thing. So I think they all have their niches, and I'm really happy to take this space and to continue to grow in it. I don't think I'm not sure whether I answered your question completely, but that's the kind of idea that I have.
No, it was good. It was good. I think it's exactly what you're talking about. It's knowing your customer, making them feel comfortable, giving them the options to explore, and also feed them well.
Yeah.
So the what I really like, this is shout out to your kitchen, man. Like for real, that time we met up
Yeah.
at HUONE, dude, that Finnish meal was just the food was just amazing. I've never had Finnish food before. Whether or not it was a bar snack, whether or not it was a little hors d'oeuvre or canapes, whatever it was amazing. And to be honest, right, if anybody is planning on just trying having a sampler, go grab a beer or something like that. Now go down the HUONE for real. It's really, really good. I 100% support that. And we got to settle that meeting date though. It's been a while now. We haven't
Yeah,
met
it's
up
been
on
a
that one.
while. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
by the way, one more thing. Surprisingly, this is also a first for me. I actually have a community question for you. Meaning
Wow.
to say,
Okay.
a question actually came from the community that we're kind of starting up over here at the the Epic podcast, and that goes to you, right? So, starting a business during the pandemic, are there three things that they should look out for? Now, backstory of this whole thing is that somebody is actually planning to start a business right now. So, are there certain maybe three things during this period that you might want to share?
Whether you're starting a business in a pandemic or not, I don't think that really matters. Maybe you need to be a bit more careful. But for any potential business owner, you need to educate yourself in a few very basic things. So I think number one, you need to have strong found. You don't need to have strong foundation, but you need to have experience in finance, in business management, in sales, in marketing, and in operations for your specific area of interest. And if you talk about finance, right, I think the very basic thing you need to have a grasp on is bookkeeping. That's important, right? But you also need to understand the concepts of, for example, your balance sheet or your cash flow statement. The reason I'm saying this is because when you run your business, right, typically for the first year you're funding it yourself, unless you're lucky, right, you get investors. For the first year, you're funding it yourself. But what's going to happen if you fast forward 1 year, right, is you're going to have to go to banks or financial institutions to get leverage, right, to get additional funding. And typically, when you go to them, they have a certain set of questions for you, like what's your balance sheet look like, what's your cash flow on a month-to-month basis looking like. So, you have got to pay attention to this and not because if you don't have good financial statements, when it comes to the point in time you want to expand your business, you're going to realize that it's hard to get capital from banks or any other financial institution. So your financial sense is important. The second functional area that you want to at least have some experience in is really in sales, right? I mean, if you expect that your business is going to grow by hiring somebody to make 1,001 cold calls for you and you're not prepared to do it yourself, then I think it's a little bit hard, right? Because you have got to be in the mix and you got to be hunting the business because these clients that you secure now when your business is a bit smaller, right, are going to grow if you treat them well. So finance is first, second is sales. Be prepared to do it yourself. Typically, what I would suggest is as a business owner, you handle the finance stuff and you handle the front end sales stuff yourself. And the administrative role in between, you probably get some help from. Third thing is be prepared to do the marketing to a certain extent yourself. Most people may be a little afraid to talk about Google ads or Facebook ads or LinkedIn ads or whatever, right? I think it's important to have an understanding how they work because you can save a fair bit of money if you do it yourself. And it's not rocket science, there are really good courses online and it won't take you a year like doing a degree or 2 years, whatever. It take you like a few days and you can experiment, right? Try, right? So once you control the sales, the marketing aspects, or the finance part, right? I think you're generally set. I'm assuming that obviously if you have a business idea and you want to roll it out, the operational part will be something that you already kind of know, right? So I think the point what I'm trying to say is, number one, know the functional areas, but in specific those three. Make sure your supply chain, if it's an actual good, it's goods, it's a sound supply chain. And once you know the basics and the fundamentals, you basically reduce the number of variables that you don't know. So you can spend the time to figure out the huge variable that you don't know, which is your customers, right? Because you start off a wonderful idea. Okay, I'm going to do co-working spaces at HUONE. But when you actually go and market it, you realize, hey, damn it, people don't want it because of this and this reason, right? So reduce your variables so that you can figure out the biggest variable out there, which is your customers. And that should be your priority. Customer acquisition and customer growth, right? Yeah, so I mean, for any potential business owner, these are the two things that I would tell them. So to recap, understand your key functional areas, know those three very, very well, and spend more of your time on the variable that you don't know, which is your customer. I think that's the key thing. And then once you understand your customer, you can map out the whole customer journey and touch points to your business and make sure all those touch points are as good as they can be, right? I mean, back end, if you're struggling, it's okay because customer doesn't really see that, right? Because over the long run, you can probably sort it out, right? But just make sure that once you have these two areas sorted out, focus on the customer journey, every single touch point that the customer has, and then really work on it, right? Because I think what people tend to see is that they like to be associated with businesses that are always improving and evolving, right? If you never change, and then they just look at you as this business that just is stagnant, right? And yeah, so that's what I would suggest. Yeah.
Okay, that was quite a lot. Very, very comprehensive. Thanks, Ian. I mean, you covered it from a macro and a micro perspective. Thank you so much. And if you are listening out there, whoever it is that posted the question, now I honestly I've learned a lot. So thanks for asking that question. Really appreciate it. So the next thing is also now moving on a little bit more on a personal level. I mean, one of the things that I've also wanted to explore a little bit more is a personal leadership series, or at least some ideas of your styles of leadership. First off,
Right.
what are your leadership values?
Sorry, I'm not distracted.
No
All right,
worries. You're getting
I'm trying
closer to the camera so everybody can see the handsome face. I get it.
I'm trying to bring down the screen brightness because my battery is getting quite low. So if I get cut off, we might need to get reconnected. But okay, Edric, your question was leadership styles, right?
Yes. What are your leadership styles and values?
Well, I do understand that there are in the theory, leadership theory, there are a few styles that one can adopt. But I think for me personally, it's about focusing on leading by example. That's one thing. And once your team, so okay, if I were to give you an example, if I were to have a new hire, first and foremost, I would try to train this individual myself most of the time. Make sure they really understand what I want as a business. If you run a business unit, then okay, make sure your team in the BU understands it completely well. And once they show the ability to master what you've taught them, allow them the opportunity to be empowered and to make their own decisions. So it sounds a bit strange, but I would say be a bit hawkish at the start. Once they show that they can run, allow them to go on their own. That's the first thing. But you always have to remember that people by nature get bored very quickly when they're doing something that they're already pretty good at. So just watch out for the point where they accelerate and they learn, which is a very difficult process. Give them a few weeks or months to kind of like plateau and do what they do really well, and then prepare them for the next jump, which is to teach them a new thing, right? So a very simple example are the interns that we have here. So the interns that have been with us for a good 6 months, quite a number of them, or rather all of them, have transited into full-time roles. And if I were to compare this to the previous team in HUONE that I had, right, they are doing full-time roles that our full-timers did previously. So I mean, in the kind of structure here, we have event hosts that do the kind of setup for the rooms and to make sure everything is done correctly and the venue is clean. And then we have event coordinators who take the event orders and execute it for the business and who liaise with the event host or the kitchen team. So the interns now are doing the event coordinator role, which used to be a progression step for full-timers. When they start with event host, they move to event coordinator. So our interns are doing it now, right? And the only reason we could do that was to push them really hard, show them new boundaries, let them plateau a little bit, and push them again to take the next thing on. Then you're going to realize that hidden gems will come out, right? Folks that skills that you never thought was present in a particular individual suddenly comes out. So that's my leadership style. I don't know whether it fits into any one model or format, but that's what I generally do. I think the point is I always have to make when the person leaves here for whatever reason to get more money or to get a new challenge, they have to leave a much better person than when they came in. So that's the logic. Yeah.
Okay. This one we are very aligned. Now, I honestly believe in that. You train your people, and at the end of the day, right, whether or not things come full circle, somehow or other, you're not building another Ian. We're not
Yeah,
building another
exactly.
Edric. That we're
Yeah.
helping that person to build up that person to be the best he or she could be, and that is, I think, one of the best things about being giving, whether or not you say is leadership by example, or the other spectrum of that is servant leadership. I really enjoy and appreciate that very, very much as well. One of the things that some of us are also looking for through your experience, in the events industry, is that are there key tips to project management, for, let's say, the current project managers who are up and coming? What are your key tips to them?
I think um, where do I start, right? So I mean, I will sound like a broken record, but number one, know your budget, know your cash flow, and once you know that, I mean, most of the time when you want to run a project, I mean, let's assume you know the basics of running a project, right? I think most of the time the questions that you get, they're really difficult, involve, number one, you having to spend money. That's very critical, right? Your client, whoever it may be, or exhibitor or sponsor, will say, hey, I want X number of additional things, right? And it always boils down to a question of dollar and cents. So for you to be able to say yes or no, right, just be very cognizant of your budget, know what your true costs are. And I really mean true costs, not the cost that your friend in operations tells you. Know the actual cost, for example, to set up a 3 square meter shell scheme booth with white color that is in white as opposed to a colored one, or what's the cost of 1 meter of carpet, 2.2 meters wide, for example, whether it's recycled or not. Know the actual cost, because once you know the actual cost, you know your budget, right? You'll be able to decide, okay, by saying yes to this customer who's going to give me 10K, I will be able to afford these ancillary items, which will only cost me this amount. So know your numbers very well, you're able to answer, because typically questions that really stump us as project managers are those related to budget. That's one, right? The second thing, that if you are running you asked about exhibitions, then I think I'll throw in conferences as well. If you're running a conference like what we used to do, right? And you plan your conference program, and this is the way your program is going to pan out, and you decided that because you don't want to be a complete sellout, right? You have 2 or 3 sponsorship slots. If you are in the position where you start to sell out your whole program, that's when you know your idea will never last. It will last you for the first edition because it's novel and new and people want to try new things, right? But if you sell out your idea too fast and you don't have a good control over it, right, then it's just going to go down the drain. And the only reason I'm saying this is because, unfortunately, I went through the experience years ago, and it was very painful to see a project die because you decided to sell out, and numbers was more important than long-term sustainability. So control your content well, control your expenses and your budget, and you would probably be a pretty damn good project manager, and obviously have work on the EQ. I think that's like basic for any role, right? Regardless whether you're front, mid, or back office. Yeah.
Very, very true. And I also think that all successful CEOs, I've said this time and time again, we are tired but never exhausted, right? We're beaten,
Wow.
we're beaten up, but we're never beaten. In that sense. So I do want to ask this, what's your balance in life? How do you maintain that health in terms of that mental drive? At the same time, your body has to keep going. It's not like one day it's just going to shut down. You're ready to go each time, as tired as you may seem.
Yeah, I honestly cannot answer that question well, because I honestly don't have balance. I spend a lot of time at work. I mean, on average, I do 13, 14-hour days, sometimes 16-hour days, because the business needs it at this point. I recently got married, and my wife calls me the invisible husband because I'm always at work. Do I want it for the long term? No. But I think balance is, in the grand scheme of things, is knowing that this is critical right now. You're putting a bit more focus, but the objective is to get it more balanced out in the future when cash flows are more consistent. You can be fully staffed, So I think it's about balancing what you have in the grand scheme of things, and knowing that this situation is the here and now, right? I mean, the here and now may be like 2 or 3 years, but that is the here and now, So to answer, I don't have balance now. Right? I spend too little time with the family, but Yeah, man.
Entrepreneurship life.
I wish I could give you good advice, but that's the situation right now.
No, but that's a fact. Entrepreneurs, seriously, they're all about this life right now. And
Yeah,
exactly what you mentioned, and the first few years, they just gotta ride it out, and that's exactly what you're doing. So more power to you. Um, and with that, I think that there's one last segment that we always close off the show with, and that is the Epic Questionnaire. Basically, this is a quick fire session where I
yeah,
ask you questions and you just answer them accordingly. So
sure.
now, Ian Wu and the Epic Questionnaire, are you ready?
Yes, I hope my battery
Okay.
doesn't die, but okay, let's go.
One word that you love the most.
Perseverance,
One word that you dislike the most.
giving up.
If you could have a conversation with one person, fictional, non-fictional, dead or alive, who would that be?
Genghis Khan, I want to know how the hell he did it.
Nice. Well, and what do you say to yourself in the mirror every morning?
I hope I survive today.
It's just struggling. Name one superpower that you'd like to have.
The ability to not sleep. Yeah.
Well, I think you have that superpower, you know.
No.
You
Crap,
already
no.
have that superpower. Your superpower is not being able to sleep. The problem is whether you can stay that way all the way and not feel tired. That's the problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, the favorite dish to eat.
I just eat whatever is convenient. Yeah.
Okay, just as long as it's food.
As long as it's food. Yeah.
Okay, now this one is good for you. Favorite travel spot or the next travel spot you would like to go to with your
Oh,
wife once
uh,
borders open up?
Chamonix, the Chamonix area. I think the French, Italians, basically the Alps region is so beautiful. You know, like you can start at, if you want to do a road trip, right? You can start at like Monaco, Nice area. You take the SS20 up to Italy, right? Then you hit the mountain ranges that go into Grenoble. I think those are beautiful driving roads, along with the Mont Blanc area, Chamonix area, of course. So if I could go there once the borders open, I will, to do a massive road trip. Yeah.
Okay, so Mrs. Wu, I have this on record. Okay, so please, if you are watching this, I will send this to you. I will WhatsApp you, and you will use this at your discretion. All right, moving
Okay.
on.
Yes.
Something in the arts that you've always wanted to do, but you haven't been able to do yet.
Play the guitar. I've tried it.
Oh,
My fingers, they don't listen to me for some reason.
it's
Yeah,
okay.
I
Can.
suck at playing guitar. Yeah.
What does retirement look like to you?
Oh man, I hope I don't have to retire actually. I mean, I love working. Yeah, I love working and being involved in something. So I hope retirement involves me still being involved in something, and sound, not to sound bad, but like just sitting at home and doing nothing every day. I'll probably get bored out of my mind. Yeah.
Okay. That sounds absolutely fair to me. And last thing, how do you want to be remembered? What's your legacy?
Well, I've never thought about that, man. I guess if I leave the business, whatever I'm doing, and it continues to run and prosper because of the systems that were put in place, I'd be damn happy. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's it for the Epic Questionnaire. Thank you so much, Ian, for joining us this week, on the podcast and sharing your stories so openly. Now, ladies and gentlemen, again, thanks so much for watching, Ian and myself. Remember, on the YouTube channel, please like, comment, subscribe. Also join us on LinkedIn, on YouTube, Google Podcasts, whatever it is. And please visit HUONE Singapore. I'm serious. They have really good food. It's fun. It's nice. It's in a central location. And do support. If you need to go local, or well, do something in Singapore. Okay, go to HUONE Singapore. All right, with
Thank you.
that, thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.